We are recording.
To the Decentralized News podcast, where we report the major events affecting the crypto economy. I'm your host, Piter, joined as always by Aussie. Let's just jump right into our educational and entertaining content that is not financial advice. A lot of big stories. We're going to lead with a collaboration on the government banking level for Argentina and El Salvador. We also have some Donald Trump statements, some change in rhetoric, or continuing the change in rhetoric, but coming out pretty strong. And then we're going to talk a little bit, of course, about the ETH ETF.
You got to talk about it.
That was quote unquote approved, but we'll dig into that a little bit. And then we'll touch on macro briefly. Not a ton going on there, but it's always moving. And then there's some interesting stories in the speed run, as always. Let's kick it off. According to an official report from the Argentinian National Securities Commission, sounds a lot like the SEC, and held a meeting with Juan Reyes, the president of El Salvador's National Digital Assets Commission, which is probably a pretty powerful commission out there. They met last week to discuss the Central America's countries' experience in adopting Bitcoin. We've been following the Javier Milei story. He's a libertarian candidate that was elected. So there's some excitement from the Bitcoin community around that. It's a big deal to Bitcoiners. There's like the first three waves of Bitcoin adoption. There was the cryptographic punks or that element. Then there was the libertarians, and then there was the quote unquote money go up. I don't know what we're in now. Maybe
inflation go wild.
Yeah, maybe now we're in the institutional era. Maybe there was something in between. But some of the early adopters were libertarians for Bitcoin, kind of freedom money. Libertarians generally just want the government out of their life. They don't want any rules. Less government is better. Just give me my freedoms and we'll suffer the consequences for it. We'll take the good with the bad. It's their general mindset. But anyway, so El Salvador was the first country to recognize Bitcoin as legal tender in 2021. So there's been excitement that this may continue. Over the years, the country unveiled several Bitcoin-related projects, including Bitcoin bonds, volcano-powered Bitcoin mining, a citizenship by Bitcoin investment program, and they've embraced this strategy that they're accumulating Bitcoin. They've mined 474 and purchased, and they currently hold 5,750. The Argentinian commissioners stated after this meeting, El Salvador has emerged as one of the leading countries, not only use of Bitcoin, but also stood out in the world of crypto assets. We want to strengthen ties with the Republic, and therefore we're going to explore the possibility of strong collaboration agreements with them. So it's like they're researching and looking into how to maybe adopt it in their country. It was the bullish statement.
Yeah, it sounds like they're definitely falling like, hey, this, based on what we're hearing from this conversation, this might benefit us. The Argentinian peso is one of the worst inflating assets in the world currently. So they're part of why Milei was elected was to help try and bring that under control. So the adoption of Bitcoin might be seen as one of those measures that everyone's calling for and helps stabilize their currency a little bit.
And they have a stronger possible need for it, like really need it. Whereas maybe here in the States, it's more we want to invest in it, we want to lead in it, and maybe we need it more than we think too. But they're dealing with, like you said, the very, very high inflation, so there's a stronger need to maybe adopt it quicker there.
Yeah, they were talking triple-digit inflation at one point in time. So it hit somewhere around 150 or 126% at one point. Absolutely incredibly high rates of inflation. This meeting follows some other bullish news from Argentina about Bitcoin, with the election first of Javier Milei, who had spoken positively about Bitcoin during his election campaign. Then a month later, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has legalized the use of Bitcoin in settling legally binding contracts, so you can pay and conduct contracts in Bitcoin. They've also unveiled a registry of virtual asset service providers. So it's a regulatory body that's supposed to help regulate the local crypto sector. And now we've got this new potential collaboration between Argentina and El Salvador. But this is just part of a greater sea of change that we're seeing.
What I also want to point out one other thing with this last story, and that's just Javier Milei in general. Like, he definitely comes off as a type of person that is capable to make big and drastic changes. So I think that's one of the other reasons for hope with what's going on there in Argentina. But anyway, go.
Yeah, we're seeing a sea of change. The Japanese stock market in general has not been performing well. There's lots of concerns in Japan right now about their financial markets. However, MetaPlanet, which we reported on 2 weeks ago, who added Bitcoin to their balance sheet, has become the best performing stock on the Japanese stock market this past week. Twice they were halted at a maximum daily gain of 50%. And that was 2 days in a row. That's pretty huge. When you've got a stock market that's generally not doing well, to have a stock go up over 50% 2 days straight, that's pretty big. And the fact that it's MetaPlanet just following their addition to Bitcoin looks pretty good for Bitcoin and for MetaPlanet at that point.
Yeah, so you have a company, they've added it to their balance sheet. They come out with a statement that we reported on where they're really embracing it. It had very MicroStrategy type vibes to it. So you have this is just very recent success, but when you see this kind of success, it's how are other companies not looking at this and raising an eyebrow? And it's like this idea of like slowly then suddenly, are we going to see a floodgate open? That's what's so exciting about this story to me. You know what I mean? Like, is it a sign of like leaks in the dam where this thing's going to bust open here in a second?
I think we are more than likely going to start seeing that dam open. I don't know if we see it in the next couple of months, but within the next year or so, we're having enough stories already just on the 19B filings that we were reported on 2 weeks ago about just the number of banks that are holding the ETF in the US and across the world. It's starting to permeate, but I think we're going to see more and more companies looking at ways to shore up their finances. And I think that will definitely involve Bitcoin for the most part. I think as we look at some of our other stories this week, I think it will probably show in some of these other stories as well. I definitely think, I guess the sea of change that you like to title this episode is really starting to take over. And I think it's starting to get hard to ignore.
One of the sea changes you're talking about, or we've been talking about, is Donald Trump. He really changed his rhetoric. Recently, we had that story where he was speaking to his NFT holders, and he made some pretty strong comments. He seems to have really doubled down, really maybe saw the same thing the Democrats did when they seemed to change their stance, is that this is an important issue and could decide the election. Just thinking about the 2 election cycles 4 years ago and the presidential cycle, it is taking on a whole new life and suddenly very positive. But Donald Trump came out. Now, he was speaking to the Libertarian National Convention, so keep in mind the crowd he's talking to. But still, it came out with very strong comments. He said, I'm going to give a couple quotes. I will also stop Joe Biden's crusade to crush crypto. We're going to stop it. I will ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in the USA, not driven overseas. So wants to keep the business here. Said, another quote, I will support the right to self-custody. I thought this was huge because he hasn't really said that yet.
Yeah, it's not a statement that he's made before, so that's a pretty big statement to make.
Now, these are just claims. He's running for election. So there is no politician in history that has come through on every promise that they've made on a campaign trail. But at least he's speaking, at least he's saying the words, and he's like, RFK is not getting all these votes from me, or whatever they're seeing in the polling. But anyway, and then he also had this line, it was about Elizabeth Warren, so we got to say this, but to the nation's 50 million crypto holders, I will say this, with your vote, I will keep Elizabeth Warren and her goons away from your Bitcoin. And I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. So it hits everything. No central bank digital currency, Elizabeth Warren, right to self-custody, we don't want to drive the business away. And he doubled down on the Truth Social just later that day, putting it in writing. So just saying he's very positive about it.
Yeah, I think that's massive. Just to be fair, I think your comment about audience is so important. The fact is, he's talking about this to the Libertarian National Convention. So the right to self-custody is massive for them. They don't want the government interfering in their affairs. So if they can hold their Bitcoin and their cryptocurrency themselves, that eliminates some of that risk in their eyes. And Lizzie Warren is considered probably the most hated politician, if not one of the most. So
in Bitcoin and crypto circles,
absolutely. But I think even in libertarian circles and Republican circles, she probably doesn't poll too well. But yeah, he's doubling down on these comments. I don't know if he just saw his polling jump up higher when after the comments that he made to his NFT holders, or if there's other polling that's going on or lobbying that's going on that's having an impact.
Yeah, like at the NFT one, he said, I'll support Bitcoin campaign donations. He wasn't sure if he had it, and he didn't, but they officially do now. He was like, we don't, we will. And
he did real fast.
Yeah, like this all is happening in real time. It's really taken off. Just seeing it play out in this year's presidential elections is really interesting. I never thought it would be this prominent. I didn't imagine it. I was curious how high it would go, but I'm excited about that.
Oh, absolutely. Because Biden, like hours after Trump added the option to donate via crypto, added it to his platform as well. A slow changing of his tune, not nearly as big of a sea of change as we're seeing with Donald Trump just jumping on that crypto train. But we're definitely seeing some changes, especially if we look even in the House of Representatives, where we've seen generally anti-crypto sentiment with the Democrats. We had a bipartisan bill that approved the FIT 21 bill, which is the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act. So that's essentially it's a generally pro-crypto bill, which is designed to help regulate the cryptocurrency market. And this was a bipartisan bill. So
while it was bipartisan, it was still mostly Republican, and there was enough Democratic, detractors. But it is bipartisan. I don't think it would have passed otherwise, but it's still strong.
Oh, there are still some clear lines, but the fact that this
more detractors,
the fact that you've got some Democrats feeling confident enough to go and vote in favor of this bill means something.
Bills. Yeah, they're passing bills. It's not. There's still more hurdles to go through, but for this to become law, but there are expectations that it's going to pass, and it's just I don't know the details of the bill too much, but it still overall seems very positive.
It gives some definitions to what's a security, what's a commodity. Some legal experts say that there are some big holes. It doesn't really necessarily match the market fully, but it's a step in the right direction. Regulatory clarity would be massive.
Honestly, like just the fact that they're addressing these laws, it's hard to get bills to get voted on. They can't vote on everything. They have limited time that they're there. So the fact that they're addressing this new asset class is,
it's massive. It's really big, and it's not the only bill that they've passed. They're allowing high-profile banks to hold ETFs. There's a few other moves that they've made that are, I'd say, relatively pro-crypto. Like, they aren't massively pro-crypto, but they are moves in that sentiment, and they're building to that agenda. They are contributing to providing the regulatory clarity that I think a lot of the crypto market has been looking for, just in terms of being able to figure out where they stand and how to invest. So
this is probably a good spot to shift over to the topic, which would be the ETH ETF, in terms of regulatory clarity and what's going on, and a shift also. But the ETH ETF was approved. But just to be clear, the Ethereum ETF has a clear path for approval, but it's not trading yet. That's the way I'm reading this. The SEC greenlighted the so-called 19B4 document, and it's a big step towards these funds launching their ETF, but not the only one. Next up, the SEC also needs to sign off on registration statements known as S1. S1s that'll be submitted by the fund issuers. There's a comment period. The agency's Division of Trading and Markets ruled on the 19B4. The Division of Corporate Finance handles the S1. So it's just in the next step. So it's not clear to launch yet, but it appears the approval is just a matter of time. I think it's fair to say that. The S1 approval process is set. Yeah, it has comments. There's no specific deadline. So no one can say for sure how long it's going to take. I've heard between 2 weeks to a couple months.
Yeah, 3 weeks is like a minimum that I'm hearing from most people to see this kind of see a future. So it's not like the Bitcoin ETFs that were essentially trading 3 days later. They're taking a little bit more time. They bought themselves a bit more time while not landing themselves in court, which proves me wrong. I will admit I got proved wrong. They avoided court, which I wasn't expecting.
You're right in a way. It seems like it was going to go. Gary Gensler had some comment the day that these 19B approvals came out. And it was something along the lines, I don't know the exact quote, but that things changed in the court and we had to acknowledge those differences from court rulings, something along that line. So it was almost like they knew a lawsuit was coming. It was going to be egg on their face, a lawsuit that they couldn't win potentially. You were right in a way too, right?
Yeah, like that comment from Gary Gensler is telling, he's essentially saying the court doesn't like us anymore. And we know that if we didn't improve, we would have ended up in court and we would have lost. So yes, you're right. And I guess the fear of court drove the approvals, where as maybe in the Bitcoin case, they didn't necessarily fear the courts. And I think that has to do with a lot of the things that we've seen in court recently in terms of the debt box case, some of the cases with Binance and Coinbase, lots of kind of positive cases going on there. And that's definitely maybe put a little bit more fear in Gary Gensler and the SEC, or push their agenda or push an anti-crypto agenda too strongly.
The other question with this ETH ETF was, does it settle the question whether or not ETH is a security? I thought this was an interesting quote to give it some context, but Variant Chief Legal Officer Jake Chervinsky noted on X, if these funds are allowed to trade, it would likely mean that unstaked ETH in particular isn't viewed as a security at the agency. So there still may be difference in caveats, but I thought this quote in general kind of articulated some of the muddy waters that's still there.
Yeah, I don't think the muddy waters are really unmuddied yet. I do think that is an interesting distinction, because I think that all of the ETFs pulling the staking from their requests and their applications, it does show a distinction, although it could just be a risk security, like a security protocol in terms of potential loss of ETH, but it could be is it a security versus a commodity per a Howey test distinction as well, which would be interesting, especially because Kraken has announced that they are going to be pulling staking from their platform for ETH. So this is a little bit interesting, maybe a preemptive move. They see the writing on the wall that staked ETH is a promise of return and makes it a security versus unstaked ETH. So,
yeah, maybe that'll be the difference. Staked ETH, when you stake it, it's in a different contract. It has a different ticker. Maybe those become securities, but like the regular ETH does not.
That'll be interesting to see how that goes.
The other thing, like imagining how this plays out and how it changes market dynamics, is there's going to be this growing bag of ETH that is unstaked compared to the other bag of ETH that could be staked. Like it couldn't. Any of this ETH in the ETFs couldn't even be staked.
At least right now. So they could always amend an ETF it later down the road and make it so that they could stake it, or stake a portion of it. Like you maybe becomes a rule once they have more time to review the security, or the ETFs have been running for a few years and they are like, hey, we need to add this. Our customers are demanding this type thing. Mm-hmm. It could be that no more than
you learn that you can stake, and it's like, oh, why don't I just my little profit, I'll sell it and then I'll go buy it on chain.
For my dad, it was like it's a dividend. Like it basically adds a dividend to my stock, which makes it a really nice dividend. And because the staking rewards are fixed, more or less, I know it's a dividend that will never disappear in terms of the rate. I will earn 4% of the ETH every year. of my staked ETH every year. And so maybe we see it that they start no more than 10% of the ETH in the ETF can be staked. At maybe is their first rule, and then maybe it slowly over time grows as people get more comfortable with staking and the security. Because I do think that some of the security for big wallets and that kind of self-custody at a large scale not necessarily been nailed down perfectly for everybody for anything other than just holding. And so they probably would have to work with Coinbase, but maybe Coinbase also gets out of the staking game. We'll see. Although I feel like they're a little bit less likely to back down than Kraken.
It makes sense because you think of a gold ETF, which is a commodity. I can't think of a situation where I would earn dividends on it. But like a stock, which is security, that's where I see the dividends.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty interesting to make that comparison, that's for sure. That being said, please consider liking and subscribing to the video. We do this show roughly every week. Here and there we aren't, but we're here to provide you with interesting and entertaining conversations all about the crypto market, trying to help give you some clarity and help decipher what's going on in this market week to week. So,
and we basically will do some headlines like we just did, then we'll jump into macro. We're going to do that next, and a little altcoin speed run, try to give you a full rundown of everything that's affecting the crypto economy. Let's jump into macro. A muted week this week. We have PCE inflation numbers coming out on Friday. This will be the first inflation number since CPI came in cool last week, which was a day after PPI came in a little hot. So it was an interesting week. We're about 2 weeks out to the next Fed meeting. And we always look at the expectations. It's expected no change, like 99% no change. So it settled in. But I was surprised to see the 1% on a raise. I haven't seen anything on that side of the chart. Like we're going to go up. I don't remember last time I saw that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that for...
It's 1%, but still, it was there.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that for at least 6 months, probably. Maybe a little less than that. But yeah, expectations are still towards no change. And I think that will continue unless we start really seeing a change in those inflation numbers. CPI coming in a bit cool is a good sign, but
I guess the market didn't bite that much because the PPI was a little hot, and they're thinking, oh, it could go up. I was like, it must be the PPI numbers.
PPI numbers kind of producer. So if it costs more to produce things, then it's gonna cost. You got to sell it for more to keep your profits. So I think we're looking at a scenario where they see some underlying numbers that maybe aren't as encouraging. So we'll see what PCE says, and maybe PCE will give us some better news. But just to tag on to that expectations, we're looking right now at a 50-50 shot in September of the first cut occurring. There is a meeting right at the end of July, and that meeting is almost 90% to no change, essentially 90% no change, and then 10% towards a potential cut. So not very likely for the end of July, but a mid-September cut seems to be at least what everyone is expecting right now, with some expectations of maybe a second cut this year in November or December. So expectations have tempered quite a bit, which I think is a good sign, but we still need inflation in PCE and CPI to come back down into a more reasonable range.
And we keep an eye on the macro. We're looking for that interest rate cut because it tends to be very good for risk assets like crypto. Not financial advice, but it's why we keep such a close eye on it. We generally considered bullish, so want to get a feel for when it's going to happen. But let's jump into the speed run. Speaking of all these risky assets.
Yeah. So Say has launched their V2 Gourd on May 27th, and it will bring it into a high performance parallelized EVM, so making it more cross compatible with Injective, Ethereum, Matic, AVAX, and that's a pretty huge upgrade. Definitely puts Say in a better connectivity boat.
Bring on the cross-chain future. Well, we also have Uniswap and a cross protocol. They've introduced a new ERC token, ERC 7683. It's a new ETH standard that aims to create a universal filler network for cross-chain intents, reducing costs and fragmentation while benefiting both dApps and users. So yeah, a new Ethereum protocol. I thought that was interesting. I don't know much about it, but something about cross-chain.
Intents are huge. It's one aspect of cross-chain communication that people are looking at, and people are using it for different things, but cross-chain intents are kind of one phase of a potential cross-chain future and making it quick, easy, and cheap. And so they're looking at using this new token standard, it seems, to make that kind of communication cheaper cross-chain to communicate those intents to hopefully reduce costs, which would be great. If it's cheaper to move things across chain, then you're more likely to be interested in doing that and using those L2s that are a bit more fragmented.
Thanks for breaking that down. That helps me a lot. Swap is also in the news in that there will be, what was it?
They'll be adopting the new token standard when they go cross-chain with Uniswap X, and their vote to enable fee sharing.
Yeah, they're doing their vote starting on May 31st for the fee sharing idea that they have for the Uniswap token, changing it from strictly a governance token.
And a competitor for Uniswap, Mo, or Merchant Mo, like Trader Joe, which is the main DEX on Mantle, they are already activating fee sharing for Mo stakers next week. So that's big for just a general shift in governance tokens. I think governance tokens have realized they don't perform into a second market unless there's more to them. There's more rewards to just holding them. And so fee sharing seems to be where they are going, which is a sensible thing. If you're participating in governance, you should also be rewarded for participating in that governance via fees that they make. So that's pretty interesting. But we've also got Moonbeam that is doing something pretty wild. They are launching the Moonrise initiative. The initiative is basically a massive brand redesign and a new product roadmap with major enhancements to the core protocol, increasing transactions per second, adding ETH's decon upgrade, governance optimization, looking at the Moon River Canary network, using Axelar bridging, and the ZK Auth program. So they're really looking at taking themselves from this little chain that not a lot of people are using to really bring their connectivity to the next level and get reintegrated and up to speed with everything else that's going on in that ETH ecosystem and the world of layer 2s.
I have not heard about Moonbeam in a long time. If you know anything about Moonbeam, you've probably heard of a project called Rome. That was like the one, like the only project on Moonbeam. I don't know. I want to say the only one, but
one of the few.
They had a little bit of a presence like towards the end of the last cycle, and then I haven't heard anything.
Oh, they shut down. They shut down months ago, like a year ago. Over.
Oh, okay. It's just completely done. Yeah, it's just we'll see if it can be a phoenix.
Yeah. That being said.
Yeah, we'll go on to the next one. Rumors of a possible BTC support on MetaMask. So Coinbase shared this post from Ian Allison123. Quote, MetaMask is adding Bitcoin support to its popular Ethereum wallet, according to people familiar with the matter. So just a little rumor, but
MetaMask going after the Bitcoin space.
Maybe more, they're more of like a DeFi wallet. So maybe it's because of ordinals and ruins, things like that.
Yeah. Well, that and a lot of their competitors are, I think Phantom and a few others, they're either in that space or getting into that space. So they don't want to be.
There's a lot of liquidity in Bitcoin. So to be able to access that through MetaMask.
Yeah. That being.
It could help with DeFi adoption too, because you can
now
take some profits out, put it into DeFi, experiment around a little bit.
Yeah, without needing KYC, which would be great for those that don't believe in KYC or don't want to KYC. So definitely an interesting point there as well.
One of my highest conviction plays probably that I have besides Bitcoin is Chainlink and Swift will have a discussion on tokenization on May 30th. Rumors are that Chainlink will also make a big announcement in this regard. So looking forward to see what that is. And this is just after Chainlink completed a pilot project with 10 of the world's largest financial institutions. So really love the development I've seen out of them in this off season.
Yeah, that's a pretty big development, to be honest. And they're really going after that traditional finance space.
And when you see just the overall change in the environment of adoption and all those headline stories that we were talking about, it really makes Chainlink look like they've been focused on the right thing.
That's for sure. And another little story, DYDX, they are having a massive unlock. We had May, which was a massive month of unlocks in general, but DYDX, June 1st, $70 million worth of DYDX hitting the market. That's about 12% of its circulating supply. So pretty big unlock. You're talking more than 10%. That's going to have an impact. Maybe it's already depressing the price, but worth keeping an eye out on that.
And speaking of high conviction plays, probably my other biggest one, or at least it had been before, and this is not financial advice, was AVAX. And they've been pretty quiet in the news. I don't know. Maybe they just need bigger splashes to do anything. And they got passed up by Toncoin recently. That made me a little sad. Sad bears. But AVAX and Elixir Games announced a strategic partnership with Avalanche. So it's good to see the GameFi narrative coming back a little bit with AVAX. It seems like that's going to be one of their strong use cases with the subnets and everything. But they'll use Avalanche infrastructure for gameplay and digital assets. So I've heard of Elixir, and I'm not a huge gamer, but I've heard.
Yeah, AVAX is definitely hitting the GameFi narrative. That's probably where they have focused a lot and are definitely playing an outsized role. That being said, we want to thank everybody for watching the show. Remember that this is not financial advice, and to do your own research on all of the different projects that we talk about, any of the stories that we talk about, just so that you can have a better understanding of what's going on and make decisions for yourself. But please make the decision to like and subscribe on this video, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend. It really has an impact on us as content creators and at just making sure that people hear the right things about crypto. Don't just hear shillers. They don't just hear mainstream media that doesn't know enough about crypto to actually speak about it intelligently. And come pay attention to a little channel like ours that is trying to give you all the news that you could use and digest to go do some more research yourself. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.
See you next week.